Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Father Talks. I am your host, Mike D. I am here with my very special guest, Dr. David Marcus. Dr. David Marcus is a child psychologist, over 40 years working with families. Dr. Marcus, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's great to be here.
I am well. For those who are
Excuse me.
watching, you guys are watching this episode for the first time. This is actually the first time me and Dr. Second Marcus got together. Excuse me, guys. It's been a long night. I was up with my grandson all night. I am well
Oh,
tired.
yeah,
So
that's tough.
yeah, it's been a I was telling my wife, I was like, you know what? I, I think I think we could do this again. After last night, I was like, you know what? Nah, I'm good. I'm good. I would, you know what? I would be able to enjoy them and home. So
I'll tell you this, Michael. When my son was born, he didn't sleep well.
yeah.
So my wife would get up, she'd feed him, and it was my job to get him back to sleep. Right?
Mm.
I saw every episode of Mission Impossible, the original one, every one, because it was on at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was standing with my son in a football hole going like this, trying to get him back to sleep. Every episode.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, it was tough. It was. But
Listen, I know my oldest was she was the test of fatherhood because all that kid did was cry, eat, and go to the bathroom. That was literally it. I mean, sleep was such a like we would get to a point where like she would literally just cry herself to sleep, because there was just no sleep. So
well,
uh,
my wife being a physician, we were going crazy. I mean, after a while,
yeah,
we weren't getting any sleep. So she got on she got us a prescription for this little vial of fluid that was supposed to help, children sleep. We thought it was
mm,
gas. So this was anti-gas medicine, right?
okay.
So she gave him a dropper full of this clear green fluid. And lo and behold, he slept through the night. Oh, wow, this was great. And then he slept through the morning. And then he woke up like this. And we went, what is this stuff? So she looked it up in the physician's desk reference. It was phenobarbital cut with alcohol. We gave my son a Mickey.
Oh,
That's what we did. Of course, we didn't give it to him again. And he was out
right.
the next night. Yeah, but you go nuts after a while, but not being able to sleep, and so
That's
anyway,
that's that's wild.
yeah,
So
it happened. We laugh
let me,
about it now.
I tell you right now, listen, that kid was the test of my sanity and definitely the reason why I started going bold. But I'm absolutely positive. That is the one that, you know,
Jeez,
uh,
I tell
but,
you.
gotta love them. Gotta love them.
Well, you do. It's just that, you're it.
Yeah.
There's no other game in town. And
Yeah.
so you just do it. You don't even think twice. You just do it. Right? I mean, where's your option? No.
I'm, we definitely weren't one of those people. Yeah, we're going to be like, we weren't in a bad situation where we're like, hey, maybe we should leave the baby at the church. It's like, this one's ours. It's ours. We're going to figure this out. Uh,
Yeah,
I can't,
exactly.
you know, kids, have all been healthy and happy for the most part. With every kid, there's something different. No matter what the
Yeah.
books tell you, no matter to expect, it
Now
never.
that's why people come to me.
Yeah.
You know,
And, and
it's
since we're
true.
talking about you, tell us about what you do for families.
Well, my practice, I mean, for 40 years, I've been in practice as a family psychologist, I call myself, rather than just a child psychologist. And I deal with families under stress. That's been my area of specialization. Um, it's kind of ironic because I don't know too many families that aren't under stress, but I'm talking about, serious stress,
Right.
some divorce cases, high conflict, parents, custody, things like that. But also, what I've learned mainly from the children is that the thing that leads to the stress is often a lack of being able to communicate. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. And so I've helped people to learn how to communicate better. Our first time together, we talked an awful lot about that. Um, the how to listen, the emotional space that gets filled up, how to empty people out, things like that. And it really helps. Today I thought we focus more on what fathers could do for their kids per se.
Yeah, and that I love that.
So I I'm no longer doing custody work because it's very, very stressful, but I felt I needed to be an advocate for the children because I was seeing high stress, high conflict parents, some of them going through divorce and custody battles and things like that. And the kids were stuck in the middle of this and they needed somebody to go to court and tell the parents, no, don't do this. Don't do this to your child. Settle this thing because until you do, your kids are stuck in the middle. They're so focused on what's going on with you and your ex or whatever, or soon to be ex, that the children, are sort of caught in the middle and go begging, basically. And so, I help people to do that.
Right. So as it relates to fathers, how do you and I talk, pretty in detail last time, but how do dads become a soothing presence for their children?
Okay. Dads, especially with sons, but it can be with daughters too, they hold a special place, you know. Um, Being a soothing presence is more than being a soothing person. All right. Fathers, everybody's sort of in a two-income family situation now, but oftentimes fathers, and it may be just conditioning or our culture, all right? It can vary. I don't mean to stereotype, but we are typically, part of our identity is our professional identity. We want to be the good provider, you know? And as we said, fathers are typically the disciplinarian, in the family. Uh, it used to be that fathers sort of ruled the roost, but I don't think that's the case anymore, to tell you the truth.
Not so much. Everybody wants to, at least from my experience, everybody wants to be parents, but not everybody wants the hard part of parenting. So
Yeah.
those things are still, from what I see, are still primarily the primary job is the dad's to keep the kids in line. And I talked to another
Mm-hmm.
gentleman, that's one, I tried to advise him, don't be the only disciplinarian in the family.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
becomes the only role, and that's how your kids see you.
Yeah, and since that is our put it just stereotypical role, you know,
Yes.
uh, we typically parent the way we were parented. And certainly, in the older days, children are seen and not heard, and there's all kinds of things like that.
Right.
And so that's what we kind of adopt, almost you just sort of take it in. And what happens is when you take that in, there's a process, Michael, called internalization, where it's sort of like subliminal learning. Okay. Um, and and one of the things that children take in from their parents on this subliminal level is how to react to stress. All right.
Okay.
This is one reason why children who are abused and they grow up, they swear to themselves and they're absolutely sincere that they would never do to their children what happened to them. But in moments of stress, we the term is we regress. We regress back to these internalized responses and they hit, they ingress. And guess what? This becomes the legacy. I mean, this abuse is, generational. you know, And this is how it gets passed down. Ironically, and this is sort of more on a sociological level, then I'll get into discipline and all that. One of the things that we internalize typically is prejudice. Okay.
Also,
Um, when you're little, you hear the jokes, you see the reactions to people who are different, and
okay.
somehow that gets in there. All right.
Okay.
Um, and I'll give you a wonderful example of it. It's a true example that happened. well, two examples actually. But I back in college, I dated a Greek girl, first generation Greek. Okay, I'm getting some feedback. I'm going to put on echo cancellation if you don't mind. See if that helps. Huh. Okay, it's not working. Anyway, I'll keep going. Um, the so we were on a bus together, and this was back in Pittsburgh, where I went as an undergraduate. We were on a bus going downtown, and this guy gets on at another stop, and he looks kind of swarthy. Okay, uh, Semitic, whatever you want, dark hair, dark skin,
Yeah.
but he wasn't a black man. He was, more Semitic looking. And my girlfriend grabbed my arm like this. We got to get off the bus. We got to get off the bus. I looked at her. I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "I have to, I got to get off." So we got off at the next stop, even though it wasn't our stop.
Okay.
And I looked at her and said, "What happened? Did you see that man that got on the bus?" I mean, she had this deer in the headlights look. Yeah, what about him? He looked Turkish. Yeah, Turks carry knives. I mean, the Greeks and the Turks for generations, you know, hundreds of years, they were against one another. She never had an experience with a Turkish man pulling a knife on her, but it was
Right.
in there. You see
Oh,
what I mean? It
yeah.
was in there. I mean, this was this woman had a master's degree. She wasn't, she was a competent, woman, and she turned into this little girl. It was really something how far she regressed just by seeing this guy on the bus. I mean, isn't that something? But it's true. This internalized responses, that's where we go under stress. And children are great at giving us stress, especially unanticipated stress, which is when we regress the most.
Right.
Right? Emotional blowups, whatever it might be. And there you go. You see? So, this is what fathers are up against sometimes. Plus, this, the pressure of jobs and finances and all these things that can really take them away from being a soothing presence and being responsive to their children rather than reactive to them. A soothing presence, as we talked about in our first session, is someone who's okay when we're not okay in its
Okay.
simplest form, right? And so I use the term presence rather than person because, and a lot of this is up to fathers to tell you the truth, you have to make a soothing environment, you know? It's a lot harder now than back, 30 years ago because we can't, with all the electronics, with computers and laptops and, cell phones, we can't get away from work. We're always sort of on call, you know? And two income families, now you have both parents. Everything that we talk about, you and I've talked about with other people, require parents to attend to their children,
Right.
you know? You can't develop emotional language with a child. You can't help them with their self-esteem. You can't, unless you're attending to them. And I have to explain to the dads out there, but this is also for the moms. I use the term attended to rather than attention. And I'll tell you why I do that. My hair out of my face. Um, anyway, the word attention implies negative attention. You know, they're just looking for attention. That type of a phrase. Yeah, it's there. Well, I explain to parents that the need to be attended to is a need. It is not something a want. And I explain it this way. You may want a new car, right? But gee, I can't afford one right now, so I'll make the old one make do for a while longer. All right. That's something you want. Something you need are like the basic needs of life: air, food, water. Now, does the need for air go away? If you didn't have air for 3 minutes or food for
Oh,
2 days, water for three, what would happen to those needs?
you might be in trouble.
They
And you
didn't,
and get met.
yes, they intensify. In fact, they'll intensify to all you can think about is that next breath of air or next drink of water. I explain to parents that the need for to be attended to is the same. If the child doesn't get what they need as far as being attended to for many, many reasons, and as far as their maturation, the need intensifies. And the child will find more obvious, sometimes more obnoxious ways of getting their parent to attend to them. And that's what we call negative attention. And the irony here is if you just follow psychology 101, behaviorism, you want the child does something wrong, you give a negative consequence, you don't want to reinforce the behavior. So parents saying they try to ignore it or they give a consequence. That doesn't meet the need.
Right.
In fact, it makes it worse. And so the child will do something more visible and more obnoxious, to get the attention that they need, the attending that they need. And that begins a, a, a power struggle. What are you going to ground, a 7-year-old for 3 weeks? I mean, you can't do these things. You see what I mean? And so let me get back into discipline and punishment. But I just want to explain to dads that this is very important, that they make a soothing environment. Yes, you can no longer leave work at the office like in the old sitcoms and things. Dad would come back and smoke his pipe in his big leather chair. And, no, that doesn't happen anymore. Um, so knowing that and knowing there's all these impingements on what we're trying to do and knowing that it can stress us and make us regress back to old behaviors.
Right. Okay.
All this is why you need a soothing presence. I talk to people about lifestyle. I talk to them about, don't have your kids in 6 sports. You know what I mean? Because it stresses everybody out. You see what I mean? There's things that people can do. I talk to couples about you need to have some time together. It can't just be about being a parent, you know? I tell parents the biggest gift you can give your kids is to be okay yourself.
Right.
Because if you don't do that, your kids are going to know it, and they're going to be stressed too. And then they'll regress and everybody's bang, 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 bang. At that point,
Right.
the whole family's under stress.
And that's what I think the last time we talked that when you're under stress like this, we start arguing and we start fighting. And then there's no talking to each other at that point because you never
Yes,
hear what the other person is telling you.
exactly. The
Yeah.
people get filled up with intense
Right.
emotion and they don't hear each other. Everybody's saying, listen to me, no, you listen to me. And of course, the louder they get, and nobody's listening, they're,
Right.
they're filled up. So the louder they get, the more filled up they get. And guess what the kids pick up? The same thing.
And habits. Right.
It's a snowball in hell. What can I tell you? It really goes in that direction. And these high conflict families, they come to me when they're way down that road, and then I have to do so much reparative work. I tell people, the parents, that phrase, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You
Mm.
may have
Yeah.
heard that phrase.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, in what I do, the earlier it begins, it's the better because you avoid a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
So in mine, I tell them an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. It's a whole lot harder to disentangle all that than to prevent it in the first place. Okay.
M- Moving on, we discussed discipline versus punishment, and
Yeah.
I
We
really need dads to hear this. We didn't get to, like I said, we told everybody they
we
need
we
to
just touched on it.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really need dads to hear this discipline versus punishment.
Okay. I am going to take some time to do this because it's a
No,
very
hey,
important
that is
topic.
fine.
Okay. Okay. What is punishment? We'll start with that.
Okay.
Punishment is direct behavior modification. I mentioned, child does something wrong. You give a negative reinforcer, aka a consequence. And the assumption, I'm going to put it that way. The assumption is that the child is going to quote unquote learn their lesson and not do it again. Right? Sounds pretty straightforward. Nice
It's
and
simple.
easy.
It was always my job.
Night. Okay. And I tell parents if it was that simple, I'd be unemployed. If emotions were logical, yeah, sure. Now let's take back what I just said. This need to be attended to. And if it's not met, it gets more and more obnoxious, let's say. You give the consequence, it's not going to work. You see what I mean? Because it doesn't meet the need.
I was just about to say we haven't met the need to correct. By meeting the need, we help to correct the behavior.
Yes, and that's the difference between punishment and discipline. That's exactly right. All right. So, uh, you know, so we have this situation, and the problem is it's the assumption that is made, which is the child is going to learn their lesson. That's an assumption. If you're not in touch with the child's emotional perceptions of you, of the situation, that's a big guess. A little child, for instance, might say, "Oh, my dad's being mean again." They didn't learn not to do it. They learned, and the child may not do that again, but the need is not there, and the anger was never resolved if they did something angry. So they do something called symptom substitution. They'll do something different that they didn't get disciplined for. They'll beat up their little brother. You know what I mean? They'll do something to get it out.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
So with a teenager, you try to, do that simply with a teenager to teach them to learn a lesson. The teenager says, "Wait a minute, you're treating me like a child. I won't tolerate being treated like a child. I want to do what I want to do because I'm becoming an adult, and all the things that go along with individuation and I gotta be me with a teenager, and they'll rebel.
Right.
They'll find a way around your consequence. Getting into a power struggle with a teenager is pretty worthless because they'll find a way around it, you know, and you lose all credibility. And if you keep upping the ante, sooner or later they're just going to, you know, tune you out. Just, it's
I know mine did.
okay. And so you lose influence. All you can do then is react to the behavior. You see what I mean? And that's not teaching them a thing. So now we get into that's why punishment doesn't work, is the point I'm trying to make. The assumptions that are made are mostly false. And yet we all make that assumption. He'll learn his lesson. Well, maybe not. All right. Now, discipline, how is it different? Well, discipline actually comes from the same root word as the word disciple. All right. Now, I'm not talking in any sort of religious context here, but
Right.
a disciple is a student, right? It's just, in his original, the student of Jesus, right? But a student. So obviously the implication is you're trying to teach something. But what are you trying to teach? There are two reasons why children, what we call act out or act up, misbehave. The real term is act out. They're acting out one of two things, right? They're acting out first, an obvious one, which is an intense emotion, right? The second one is the one I'm referring to here. They're acting out an emotional need that has not been met, so it's become intense because it hasn't been met. There's a third reason, which is secondary, and it's actually called secondary gain. The child learns if they push the envelope hard enough, mom or dad will give in. So they'll do it, they'll keep pushing the envelope and say, "Oh, okay, right, already. I'm tired of dealing with you," that type of thing. But that's later when then the child learns, "Hey, I can get over on my parents." But let's look at the first two. All right. Okay. So what are you trying to teach the child? A more socially appropriate way of expressing that intense emotion, which means an emotional language and a safe place to express it, right?
Uh-huh.
Hence a soothing presence. And a more acceptable way of getting your emotional needs met.
Okay.
That's what you're trying to accomplish with discipline. All right. So, how do you do it? Let's talk to the how to's here. I'm glad we have the luxury of the time to actually go into this, Michael.
No,
I
I
appreciate
believe
it.
I'm happy to do it.
Okay. First of all, there are consequences that begin the disciplinary process. It's not like I'm saying touchy feely, the kid can get away with anything. No, no, no. That's not parenting. But the consequences have to follow three criteria. First, they have to be short term. You're grounded for a month. Yeah, good luck. The only lesson they're going to learn is my dad's really mean. He's a jerk. Two, they should be immediate. You were bad 2 weeks ago, so you're grounded this week. No, 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 no. That's no good either. And the third, and this is the kind of tough one, you try to make it relevant to what they did. If you spend too much time on the computer, more time than you're supposed to, you get less time tomorrow. I mean, there's some easy ones like that, but sometimes we don't have that direct thing. So we have things like timeouts. With teenagers, we take away privileges. All right. But that's not the teaching part. That's what I'm getting at. All dads out there, that is not the teaching part. The teaching part comes later. Okay, that your child doesn't like it. They huff and puff some, maybe they go to their room, you know, you give them a little time. And then even though you're mad at them, and believe me, I did this with my son, that little bugger had it coming. I'm human too. I, you know what I would do? I'll share this with your listening audience. To calm myself down after my son did something that really made me mad, I'd watch a Michael Jordan video. I loved watching Michael Jordan play basketball. He was an artist on the court, and it would calm me down. Wow, look at that. That's amazing. So anyway, I calm down and I go up to my son's room where he's still, and I'd say this. And this is going to sound odd to your fathers out there because it's a typical thing to do is to go up there and give lecture number 4 on why you're in your room, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. So I go up there and say, Dad just did something that really made it tough for you, didn't he?
Yeah.
Dad did something you really didn't like, didn't he? Sounds odd, right? It's an invitation. You don't have to. Okay, I'll give you the contrast so you understand exactly what I mean. Of course, lecture number 4 is in contrast. The other one is the most typical question that we ask our kids when they do something that we don't understand, right? If they do something crazy emotional or they hit their brother, whatever it is, we don't understand. Why did you do that? Right?
Yeah.
Or why do you feel the way you do? Let me tell you something. I've learned this from seeing literally hundreds of children. Okay. The why question is a really hard question to answer. And I'll tell you, I'll tell the dads out there why it's so difficult to answer that question. This is how it's interpreted by a child. I'm upset with you. They can see that just by your tone of voice. Why'd you do that? So I want you to give me a totally logical explanation for this totally illogical thing that you just did so that I feel better about you. I challenge you to answer that question. I mean, it's really a hard question.
Right.
We talked about the emptying out process and how it goes deeper and deeper. And sometimes on that deepest level, on the tapped into level, we don't even know why we feel the way we do. And so the child is immediately put on the defensive and doesn't know what to say. It's the opposite of helping them to empty out. All right. But it's the most logical question to ask. So instead, Dad did something that made it tough for you. The active words are something and tough.
Okay.
Something is a great word because it's not judgmental, like the why question is judgmental. All right. You're saying you did something bad. Tell me why. It's a thing. We can talk about a thing. And tough because we want the child to define their emotion. We know it's tough. Is it tough, scary, tough, sad, tough, angry, and we want them to use their own language to express it. That's the common emotional language we began to talk about last time. Okay. I don't know if we want to go into all that again, but they can look at the first episode, if you will, and they'll understand that part of it. So why this question is an invitation to start the emptying out process. Yeah, you know, my brother, I was in the middle of the level and he reset the the game and I lost the level and I was really mad. I've been working on that level for 30 minutes and I only have so much time on the computer. Come on, this is, here we go. How many broken controllers are there in the world? You know what I mean? Because of stuff like this. But anyway, okay, you mirror back what you hear. Your brother did this, this, and this. It made you really tell me about being angry at him. Well, he's always doing that. Then he does these things that really bug me. Now you're emptying out on the history level that we talked about the last time, because your son is referring to previous events with his brother. What is it like when your little brother does it? It just makes me so mad, Dad. It makes me mad around the whole world, and I don't know what to do, and you don't do much about it. And you mirror back all this, and at the end of it, here it is. Let's say the boy, he hit his brother because he, reset the game. All right. The end of it, the dad says, he's a soothing presence. He's okay. He's not getting defensive and saying, well, this is how come. I mean, that's the temptation. I understand that because you almost feel like you're being attacked, but no,
Right.
that's not your job. Your function is to help him to learn from the experience. All right. So what do? You mirror back. You don't sum up. You don't put your own spin. You don't say, oh, I went through it too. You just say what you've heard. Is that close? So I get it. Is there more? And give the child a chance to empty out completely. And then the next thing you do is honor the perception. This is all part of a process. It's not over yet. All right. How do you do that? You say to him, based on how you see it, no wonder you feel the way you do.
Uh,
Based on how you see it, no wonder you feel the way you do. This is a very important statement because notice the qualifier, based on how you see it. And then the validation, no wonder you feel the way you do. You're not agreeing that they should hit their brother.
right. But you
You're
understand.
simply
Yeah.
saying,
You
but
understand.
I get why you were so mad. You see? Now, the based upon how you see it is the qualifier, because now you get into this. Well, son, my job, now they're emptied out, they can hear you, right? They can now hear what you have to say. They don't have to defend anything because you've given them their say
Right.
and you validated their perception. All right. So you say to him, my problem is this, son, and I need your help with it. My job as your parent is to make sure both you and your brother are safe. When you hit each other, you're not safe. So what can we do? Notice the we, it's a merger, the two of you. What can we do to make sure that I don't have to give you a consequence again? I don't have to punish you again. Notice the boy's not off the hook just
Right.
because he had a valid reason to be angry. No, life lesson is you hit your brother, there's a consequence. You know what I mean? I'm not this is what we're planning for the next time. What can we do, you know, to make sure
This doesn't happen again.
it doesn't that I don't have to be mean to you again? And now you can go into, well, maybe you'll each have your own time. Maybe your brother should do something else when you're playing your game and vice versa. You can come up with lots of different solutions. We'll try that out and we'll see if it works. All right.
Right. So let, uh, let me say this. Okay. So
Mm.
these are all learned skills.
That's what I teach people to do.
Okay. So that's the thing is that I want dads because these are all things that I'm still learning and my kids are adults. I've got one in the house left, and so
Hmm. Hmm.
these would have been great things to know. This would have been a great resource, so I want dads to hear that because we're having this conversation like what you should do, but how dads start to develop the skills. I'm assuming that this is just not something you can do on your own. You, most of us won't.
Well, I talked to both parents about this, obviously.
Right.
You know what I mean? If they both understand it, there's something kind of cool here. You ever hear about opposites attracting?
Oh yeah.
It's kind of true. That's a good thing because what might really upset dad and make him regress back to internalized responses won't be the same as mom. You take care of this one because you're the calm person right now. This is why being a single parent is not twice as hard. It's four
Yeah.
times as hard. because you get no relief, like there's no respite. All right. How to do it: lifestyle, priorities, predictable time with your children so that need to be attended to is met. So they don't have to, it doesn't, like with my son, when he was 5 years old, I knew I would, with my crazy hours as a psychologist, I had evening hours, the things that typically happen in my profession. I knew if I didn't schedule regular time with my son, that it wouldn't happen. And I
Uh,
knew about this need to attend. So he was in, he was in preschool, actually. He was like 4, going on 5. And he said, "Dad, I got into a fight." "Really?" "Yeah. Me and this other boy went around the side of the school and I hit him and I beat him, Dad." So I'm sitting there going, no, no, I don't want my son to become a bully. This is not the idea. But if he had an interest in, physicality that way, little boys do, okay.
yeah,
We started taking Taekwondo together. It was a parent child class. Both
yeah,
started as white belts. 3 times a week in the afternoon, we did this together for 5 years. Gave me my time with my son. It's part of his self-esteem. We should get into that too, as far as that experience that built his self-esteem. And he took a year off to do baseball or something. He came back and I was his black belt instructor. And he finally did that really, really difficult kick during the test,
yeah.
and he broke the board and I lifted him up on my shoulders and paraded him around the, the school. It was a great experience. All right. But, he needed to learn what the martial arts teach you is really not to fight. That's what they teach you. The only time you fight is if you absolutely have to. If somebody wants your wallet, give it to them. You know what I mean? It's in fact, humility is a great big part of the martial arts. It's one of the reasons why you're never supposed to wear your belt outside the school because it's bragging. You know, a martial artist is very humble. You don't sit there. In fact, I was at a black belt class, and this one guy, he wasn't a black belt. I don't know why he was in there. He kept talking about how tough he was, that he would, you know, do all this stuff. And finally, the black belt instructor, we all looked at this guy. He was kind of, a jerk. But finally, he said, "Okay, now you're going to fight me." And the instructor was really a good fighter. He had won tournaments and stuff. So this guy was doing his bucking and weaving. He was showing off and stuff. He bucked down he ducked one time, and the guy kicked him right in the face. Boom. Now he could have kicked his head off. This guy was really good, but he just gave him a good zets, really. And he went down, and the guy got up and you know what the black belt did? The instructor said, "Get out and don't come back. You don't have the right attitude." He
Yeah,
kicked him out. We never saw him again.
yeah,
When I was a black belt instructor, I did the same thing with these kids who were showing hot dogging at the expense of the younger belts. You know, that's not right. And
yeah,
I told her, "I'm not promoting you until you change your attitude."
right. Well, and the thing is, it doesn't because you're not helping anybody. You know,
No.
yeah,
I
great. You're
mean,
doing,
it's just the way. Well, anyway, let's get back on
yeah. Oh,
on
yeah.
track here. Okay, I'm sorry. Um,
So
what have
let's
we
get in,
done?
so let's get into. We were talking about. We want to talk some more specifics about, fathers being, there for their sons.
Okay,
So let's get
let
more
me
into that.
finish this one thing.
Yep,
Two
yep,
more sentences on discipline, then we'll get into the need to be attended to, which is what we're talking about. What have you done? What have you accomplished? What are you trying to do? First of all, you've listened to your son because he knows, because you mirrored back what he said,
right.
and you've taken him seriously by saying, "No wonder you feel the way you do," by honoring his perception. What we have just defined is the word respect. When somebody feels truly heard and understood and validated, that's respect. You're showing respect. Okay. We bandy that word around like it has a singular meaning, but people define it differently. Respect is you do what I tell you to do, period,
Mhm.
or you're disrespecting me. There's
Yeah,
a lot of parents who feel that way.
And I
But,
mean,
I tell
I was
parents.
a parent for the longest time, you know, and
Yeah,
when I was a young father,
uh-huh,
you're gonna do what the hell I say, and that's the end of it.
yeah,
Again, I've done parenting classes, there are a lot of things that I've learned that have changed my perception on how I handle things with my kids.
yeah.
Even when it came to spankings, you know, it just it was I was never in a I never felt I was in a good place to be spanking my kids, because like if I was angry, then it was a bad time for me to be putting my hands on my kids because you know what? You I'm a grown man and I hit too hard to be spanking my kid,
You're
so
also teaching them to aggress under stress.
yeah, you know, and
Mhm.
I've just learned so many things that I wish I could have applied earlier on,
This
but
is one of the reasons you wanna be back on your show, Michael, and I
right?
appreciate it. That's great, parents need to be open to learning things like
Right.
when parents come in to see me, they don't come to see me first. They go to
Exactly.
their friends, they go to their family, hell, they may even go to their bartender, I don't know, but they go to everybody, but, finally, it's not working, and they knock on my door. Oh, to tell you the truth, there's a sort of a underneath message here when parents first come to see me, since they've been through all this already, and they're really afraid that Dr. Marcus is gonna turn and say, "Oh, you're really messing up." You know? And of course, I never say that unless it's a custody, situation, but I never say that because it just makes them feel terrible and, it's not right. I always use, we're going to tweak your parenting skills, you know? And, and you use the right word, a skill. What does a skill take to acquire a skill? One is a coach, me at that point. And two, exactly what you just said, practice. It's not just going to happen. You have to, first of all, make yourself a soothing presence and take care of your environment so that you can do this. You know what I mean? You got to be on the same page with your spouse if that's the situation. Even if you're co-parenting, you need to be on the same page with your spouse, and which is a whole other topic. But okay, the so that you're in the place to be able to do this. I'm a human being. I had to watch a Michael Jordan video in order to, to get back centered enough that I could be a soothing presence to my son. So you've shown respect. Now, what you've also done is something that's a lifelong process. The child has now learned something they can do differently to try out to avoid the consequence, whatever, being disciplined again.
Right.
So what have they done? They have gained wisdom. Been there, done that, know what to do the next time. That's wisdom. And that's a lifelong process. The third thing is what you've modeled. They can internalize if you hit your kids, they may hit their kids. Like we talked about, these things can come out during regression, but they can also internalize a soothing presence
Mhm.
and teaching a lot of emotional language, with their child. That can be a wonderful legacy that dads can pass down to their kids, moms too, of course, you know. So you get coached, you may drop the ball, but there's ways of making it up. We can talk about that too, Uh, and your child has learned wisdom, and they've learned how to deal with their emotions through by borrowing your okayness and being able to talk about it. In children, that's called resilience when
Right.
they can handle, stressful situations. What does that become when you internalize that as an adult? It's a common word. It's called stress tolerance.
Okay.
And that is a very important part of maturation. Because let's face it, a 5-year-old doesn't have the language, so they act on their anger behaviorally, right? How many times have you heard a parent turn to their child and say, "Don't hit your brother, use your words"? Well, that's a skill. It doesn't just happen because your kid's there, You got to help them to learn how to do that. Second, if they never get that, okay, because it's never been done and they've never been sued and just been punished and stuff like that. It's all built up inside them, but no outlet, no way of doing it. Well, let's face it, a tantrum in a 17-year-old could be jail time. You you can't do that as an adult. We call it going off half cocked,
Right.
right? You can't go off half cocked. You really can't. You hit somebody, they get hurt, you're in jail. You see, so somewhere in between 5 and 17, they got to learn how to do this.
Right. Yeah. And I know with the boys, I've always taught them to defend themselves, but never to go out around starting things. You're upset with somebody over something. Okay, just because you're upset doesn't give you the right to put your hands on other people.
Yeah. hmm
You know,
That's what they teach in the martial arts too. You don't start a fight, you end a fight,
yes,
that type of thing. Actually, in the martial arts, Michael, a real martial artist, it's not like in the movies ever, or, you know, what was that show? Ranger, I can't remember what I mean.
Ranger, Walker, Texas Ranger.
Yeah, yeah. It's
No,
never like that,
yeah,
Some big guy with his hands down like this, waiting to be punched in the face. No, no, that doesn't happen. All right. All these fancy kicks, those wheel kicks where he kicks them, wheels around. That takes too long. So anybody can see it coming. It's just, you see what I mean? No, a real martial artist, you never see the fight because they do one move and it's over.
right. Can we apply
I'm
the
not going to
same
go
thing?
into these things because I don't want to, I
Yeah,
use to
I
teach
wish,
self defense,
yeah, I wish we could apply these same things to parenting. You could do one thing and it just fixes it all.
Well, let's get back to
Okay, well,
let's
listen,
get
if you figure out a way to do that, please let me know because I want to share it.
share what? I'm sorry, I'm losing you here.
No, no, just hey, if you figure out one fix for everything, one simple thing that will fix it all, let me know.
Oh no, I mean, this is a skill. You got. I mean, I've had parents come to me. Sometimes they'll even call me. They have my phone number. And ironically, people say, "Oh, don't give me your phone number." The bad stuff happens outside my office. You know
Right.
what I mean? I'll have parents and the teenagers particularly. They have my number, and in 40 years, only one person's ever abused it.
Mhm.
But knowing that I'm there and I'm a soothing presence for them, of course, really makes a difference to them. You know, I'll sometimes have to talk to the parents of the teenager, because they're into it, and let me talk to them, and figure it out. Oftentimes I'll get, boy, Dr. Morgus, I wish I had you in my ear on Thursday night because I could really, I got stuck and they bring it in and we figure out what they could have done better or different. And, we're fine tuning those skills, you know, and I tell parents the idea of coming to see me, Michael, is to get rid of me. I mean, once you have these skills and you have access to your child feels safe and you have a language with them and you help them to gain wisdom, all this type of thing, you don't need me. You're helping them grow up. You're the, I tell parents, I am not the agent of change here. You are. I'm temporary. I see your child every once in a while, a week, 2 weeks, whatever it might be. That's not going to make the difference. The difference is going to be you. I never see children without seeing their parents unless it's an abuse situation. If, but
Well,
that's different. But
if you could give,
this, mhm.
oh, go ahead. I'll let you finish that thought.
Well, we wanted to get into the self-esteem part and the attending to part, right? Is that where we want to go next?
Well, we're short on time
Go ahead.
now, but well, if you can give dads one piece of advice right now, or we'll go on for a little bit longer. Let's what's the one thing that starting out for a dad who needs some sort of help, you know, being that being that safe space for his child, being not and also not always being the disciplinarian.
Well, first of all, being a disciplinarian isn't bad if you know how to do it, because then you're
Okay.
actually having your child to grow up. All right.
Okay.
The term connotes punishment. I understand that, but if dads, they can consult with me if they really need to. We'll go through that. But I'll go back to what I said earlier. The best gift you can give your children is to be okay yourself. All right. Take hold of the stresses in your life, or if you're married, both of you do this, have time together, have time to do your own thing, You know what I'm saying? Because you can't just be a parent and a worker and think you're not going to get drained and regress and react to your kids unless I talk to parents all about lifestyle sometimes. I just, you know, uh, so that's one of the things I would tell them. The other is these are skills that need a coach and then practice. You can take what we said today and try to apply it, but there's a couple other things about needing to be attended to and something called the fairness trap that we haven't even gotten to. Can we finish with that? Because that's part of the
So yeah,
discipline
yeah,
thing.
yeah. Let's go there.
Okay. Okay. The fairness trap. What is that? Okay. What do parents hear most often when they give a consequence to their children? That's not fair, right? And what do parents do? They start arguing logically. Yes, it's fair because you hit your brother, lecture number 4. The child still doesn't think it's fair. And how can it not be fair? I'll tell you how. If you ask the child, because you're always favoring my little brother. He gets 2 desserts and I get 1, and that's not fair. I know I have too much weight, but he shouldn't get 2 desserts. That's not fair. All this type of stuff. So it's not just based on what you just did. So you're
Right, right.
arguing emotional perceptions. Here's the way to deal with it. Rather than get into, your perception versus a child, you're never going to convince him that it's fair, and he's never going to convince you that it's unfair. So it's a moot point. What do you do instead? You do the same thing. You empty him out. Tell me how it's not fair. Well, my brother, this, that, like I said. No wonder you feel that it's unfair. But let me tell you something, son. My job again is to make you guys safe. All right. So my guess is if you do it again, you hit your brother again, I'm going to be unfair to you again.
Right.
So what can we do to make sure I'm not unfair to you again? It takes the wind out of that sail. You're not debating whether, okay, yeah, no wonder you feel I'm unfair. So what? It's going to happen again, but let's figure out what we can do so daddy doesn't have to do that to you again. Again, they're not off the hook. It's not touchy feely, you're a great kid, so I'm not going to give you a consequence. That's not life. Life has consequences. All right. But how do you deal with them? That's not the teaching part. The teaching part comes afterwards, like I'm telling you about, you know? So that's the fairness trap. Trying to argue emotional perceptions about fairness with your child is pointless. You're not going to convince him. He's not going to convince you. But this is the way to deal with it.
Yeah, and I
All
know
right.
for a fact that as parents, our kids say it's not fair. We're like, hey, life's not fair. And
Would that help you?
no, no, but right at the moment, me as a father, when we're mad and this, that, and the other thing, it's it's what comes out.
It's a platitude.
Right.
You know, what was that song? Don't worry, be happy. I mean, come on, who are we kidding? You
Yeah.
really think that's listening to that song is going to make you not worry and be happy? No. This. I mean, these are the things that get in the way of the emptying out process.
Right.
Life's
These are,
not fair.
but these are things
Yeah.
that we have to learn. And society, it it doesn't make it easy. Yeah.
I said this earlier, and it's true. And we'll probably finish up with this, but I've learned this. You have what? How many kids? 3 kids? What do you have?
No, I'm a father of 9.
Oh, you told me
Yeah.
that. So you actually, you have
Yeah.
a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Most of the people I talk to have a couple, 3 kids or something like that. And I tell them, I'll even tell this to you. You have 9 kids, mostly 2 or 3 kids. I've seen hundreds. I have a leg up on you. You know what I mean? And this is what I've learned from the children, what works and what doesn't work. It helped me be a parent. You see what I mean? So, and these ideas just develop from experience that I'm sharing with your audience, sharing with you, Michael, because these are the things that work. And these are things you got to take into consideration. It's not simple. You got to be okay yourself. You got to control your environment. You've got to learn these skills. You got to understand what you're trying to accomplish, which is helping my child process their experience so they can learn from them.
Exactly.
That's our job. That's why sharing our experiences with oh yeah, I went through it too. That doesn't really help. I tell parents, okay, the father turns to the son. Don't go out, just Angela, don't go out and drink a dozen beers. I did it when I was your age and I ended up with my head in a toilet bowl. What does the boy do? You tell me what the boy does. He goes right out and drinks 15 beers and gets his head stuck in a toilet bowl. Father says, I told you that was going to happen. Why did you do it? You can bet your bottom dollar grandpa told dad the same thing.
Yeah,
We
that's
learn from our own experiences, not from the experiences of other people. As much as we like to say, don't do what I did, maybe it works. Most of the time, it doesn't.
right.
We help them to
So
learn from their own
with
experience.
my youngest son, we've had some heart to hearts, and and he still went out and drank, you know, but he didn't he didn't take any excessive risks. Like never get went and got in the car drinking and driving. You know,
Yes,
he knew
yes,
that he would drink with his friends. He's in college. That's going to happen. You know,
yeah,
but at least the lesson that he took was how dangerous drinking and driving was. You know,
yeah.
so uh,
No, I did the same thing with my son. In fact, I said, look, if you're going to be drinking with your friends, stay there,
yes,
you know, or call me up. I'll give you a ride, of course, but stay there. And he did. He never was under the influence. All
yeah,
right. So, it's similar to what you did, because we all worry about that. And that's another thing we could go into as far as how parents can approach their children about what they do, especially their teenagers, and
right,
why parents are so scared sometimes when their teenagers are on their own. That's another topic, to tell you
yeah.
the truth.
So we'll close with that. Dr. Marcus, how can everybody get in touch with you?
Well, I have a website, Parent RX, like parent prescription, PARENTRX.org. And I have on the website, I'll give it here too. If they want to consult with me, ask me questions, that's fine. My email address is DSMARCUS, DS Marcus, PhD, DS Marcus, PhD, at parentrx.org. They can get in touch with me that way. I'm trying to get the book published. When it comes
Yeah.
out, I'll be back in touch with you, Michael, to
Oh
tell you
yeah.
the truth.
I will.
And
I want to talk about that when it comes out.
yeah, and then book is going to be Parent RX as well. Um, so I want to thank you for having me. I hope it's been
Look,
helpful to your
if
listening
if
audience.
if we can, if this episode does nothing but reach one or two dads to help them out, then it's worth it. If it only reaches one, if it gives somebody some framework to, be a
Hmm.
better parent, then that works. I'm happy with that. So hey, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for
If
having me. It's been a
Ag-
pleasure.
again, we'll probably have some more conversations. I like at some point I'd like even to maybe invite you on and bring some of my dads on, who are struggling with whatever issues. I got a couple new dads, and these are the
Okay.
things that we're talking about now. I would love for them to hear about so they
Okay.
don't make the same mistakes that some of us who are learning to be better dads now.
That that would be helpful because then we could customize what I'm talking about. And I'm
Yes,
talking generically in a sense, this is
yes,
what you're supposed to do, but applying it to different situations and and different children's emotional perceptions of their parents, da da da. All of a sudden it gets a little complicated.
right. And that would be my goal for us to do another episode
Hmm.
and bring some dads on so they can
Well,
have this
stay in,
conversation.
stay in touch with me, Michael. You know
Oh,
how?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Um, are we done recording? Are you still recording? Oh, you are. Okay.
ladies and gentlemen, Dr. David Marcus, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm looking forward to having you back.
Well, thanks a lot, Michael. It's been a
All right.
pleasure.
Hey, thank you. Take care.
You too.